They're getting a little overwhelmed because it's the finals week coming up,
Oh,
finals
wow.
couple of
Okay.
weeks. Um, Alex is always quiet and does his own thing. Sophie, we know when she's having stress, so
Okay.
she tells us, which is a good thing. We want actually Alex to also tell us, but I think he's in a very pilot, very very automatic mode now.
Hmm.
Been at it for 3 years, so he's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
We'll see.
For sure. Yeah, it's a stressful time for kids.
Oh my gosh.
Um, so we're trying our best to make sure that
Um,
um, they have enough time outside of their
Hmm.
curriculum to,
Yep.
with family, with
Yep.
online friends. So
Yep.
hopefully it's going to work out.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so this is getting started. Let me just go ahead and make sure that everybody. Hi, everyone. If you guys are watching, we're with our dear friend, Dr. Howard Rankin. We're going to start the conversation in a bit. I'm just taking care of some technical issues to make sure the sound, the video, and everything is okay for everyone. All right, so it looks like it's being posted on one of the forums. Let me make sure that it is posted on Facebook as well. All right. I don't know who that is. Oh, it's just a reminder that I should be talking to you. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I
yes.
didn't send it, but
no, that's fine. All right. So, we are going live in a couple of minutes on Facebook as well. And then we can have the conversation started. How are you doing this morning, Howard?
Oh, just doing just great. And so
Amazing.
excited to be here with you and spend a little time with you because your time is so precious, I know.
No, no,
It's our
That's
pleasure.
awesome.
It's always yours. And it's just a blessing to have you here and talk about something we all are passionate about, which is brain
correct.
health.
Right.
I think we're live on Facebook too. So
Okay.
I'm just
Good.
going to launch the conversation. Hello, good morning, everyone, or good evening if you are on the other side of the planet. We're so excited to be here again for this live conversation with our dear friend, Dr. Howard Rankin. And let's take it away.
So Howard is a chosen family member. I mean, to us, that's more important than anything because we've searched the world, and he found us.
Yes.
A brilliant man who has been at it not for 107 years as the poem he wrote, but for a long time, and he's brilliant psychologist, a brilliant coach, somebody who recognizes the importance of public health. We met with him many years ago
Yes.
in South Carolina and Hilton Head, and
That's right.
he's been connected with us, and he recognizes the value of what all of us are doing here in this forum. So all his accolades you will find, we'll share with you. But the most, and many books that he's written, but most importantly, he knows how to connect to people.
That's
I
true.
mean, of all the people that we wanted to have here, and you've seen some of the brilliant people that we have had here, the main reason is not their accolades, and they're all brilliant. I mean, from university, say Harvard, Oxford, and others. But more importantly, they know how to connect to people, and that's important to us. So often, academics create data and information that never connects to public. And one of the powerful things we learned very early on with Howard was his ability to connect to people. So we love him literally in from a public health perspective, and as from a family perspective as well. So Howard, would love to hear your perspectives on what we're doing here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm not sure whether you have a thing about bald Howards, because I know Howie Jacobson was on, but I'm assuming he's good too. No, he was good. I've watched all of the other presentations and they were awesome. Yeah. And just to
Thank you so
clarify the rhyme, yes, I did take a little poetic license in that rhyme when I said I was 107. I'm not. I'm 104. No, I'm not. No. Actually, I just turned 70, and I'm going to crush this decade with
Amazing.
the advice of these two wonderful people, because what they're doing and what you're engaged in here is really, really important. And it's not just about brain health. It's about your entire life and health. So as we'll see, you're not just making a burrito, you're actually investing. No, I know that sounds funny, but you're investing in your life and time. And I got some good examples as we go through today, what I want to say about this, but I think it's really crucial for people to understand the full significance of what you're doing. And, it couldn't be any better. This is what needs to happen. So,
Thank you.
should we get into my little PowerPoint here?
Please.
Yes.
We would love that. And you're a co-host on the meeting, so you should be able to share your screen.
My screen. Okay. Okay, so let's get down here on my Zoom and share screen. I closed. There we go. Okay, so can you see that? No.
Yes.
You can.
We can.
We can.
If you could expand the slides, just maximize it. Well, yes.
No, yeah. Get rid of the sidebars.
Okay. So let's have a look. View, probably, right?
Yeah. Or maybe you could actually you could go to slideshow, which is on the left. There you go. Yes, slideshow, and then click the first one on the very left that says play from start.
Oh yeah, there we go. You can see I've done this a lot.
Amazing.
There we go.
Looks
Okay.
great.
So there we go. So the first question is, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 1, but the light bulb really has to want to change. Okay. Now, what is that really about? In medicine and in healthcare, and particularly in the US, there's not a big push, really, a serious push at a practical level to help people make change. You might go to your doctor and he says, oh, you've got diabetes, you need to, eat healthier, you need to exercise. But so that's very general advice. And doctors aren't trained to do that. So this isn't a criticism of them, it's just the system. But the lifestyle issues that Dean and Aisha are talking about, relation to brain and physical health, are very important. So it isn't just about telling people what they need. It isn't, because that just doesn't go very far. Okay, it isn't about telling them. It's engaging them, it's supporting them, and it's encouraging them, and it's giving them the information, just as Dean and Aisha are doing in this program. And that, to me, is very critical. The U.S. healthcare system is the most expensive in the world, but doesn't rate very highly when compared to other similar first world countries. And part of that is, I think, this lack of serious emphasis on really trying to help people change. And what you're doing here is important, so we need to understand that. So medicine or healthcare shouldn't be just about telling people. It should be about teaching, inspiring them, supporting them. And if you can do this in a group setting, for me, I've done a lot of work with groups. The group setting is very powerful. Obviously, a virtual group is a little different from a real group, but I do think that it is important. And so being part of this program, I think, is critical. What Dean and Aisha are doing is they're not just telling you what to do, they're showing you, they're inspiring you, they're supporting you. And with people with such knowledge and reputation, that's phenomenal. So I think that's very, very important. Okay, so to emphasize this story, I am going to, or emphasize this point, I'm going to show, here is a picture of a wounded U.S. combat veteran. And you can see he's lost an eye and he's lost a leg. And I worked with a friend of mine, Jeff Frankhart, who's a military physical therapist who was charged in 2010 to try to work out how to get injured combat veterans back into service as quickly as possible. And so he had to devise a program that was quite different from what we see typically in healthcare. So he comes up to this guy, he talks to him, they chat for a bit, then he stomps on his foot and he kicks him in the leg. And the guy screams and wants to yell abuse, but he's not kind of in the position to do it. And then Jeff says, I've stomped on your non-existent foot. I kicked you where you don't have a leg. You have pain because your brain expected pain. You have pain because your brain told you. And of course, that's well known as phantom limb pain for a lot of people who are amputees, but it isn't just there. The message here is when you expect something, what you tell yourself is going to happen often does. And then we have misguided conceptions about what we can and can't do. So after this little encounter, Jeff said to him, "Come on, we're going for a walk." And the guy looked at him and said, "Doc, perhaps you notice I, don't have a leg. I can't walk." And there was this back and fro, and Jeff said, "Come on, we're going." The guy reluctantly got up. Jeff helped him around the ward, and then he sat back down. And then he looked up at Jeff, and his first question was, "So when am I going to be able to run again?" And with a prosthetic limb, within a few weeks, Jeff had him running again. What you tell yourself, what you're told, determines what you believe and what you can do. And I think this program is very empowering because it shows what you can do and the huge benefits of it. Even small things make a big difference. I'll tell you a little bit more about this story in a second. So healers are dealers in hope. Okay? Dean and Aisha are giving you hope. They're giving you inspiration. They're giving you the tools. This is what you can do. Don't think you can't walk around. You can. You can. Just got to know how to do it. And the problem is, and this was just fascinating listening to Jeff's journey as a military physical therapist, did some amazing things, is sometimes in trying to ensure you do no harm, you don't do any good. And Jeff has a great story. Before he worked in this combat situation, he worked on a burns unit. And one day he had to treat a 16-month-old adorable little girl. And as he approached her and she looked up at him through pleading eyes, he had a crisis of conscience because he knew what he was going to do was going to be temporarily harmful, or temporarily painful to her, just temporarily. But here she was, this adorable girl in this situation, and he had a crisis of conscience. And so he took a break and he went into the break room where there was a nun. And the nun said to him, "What's going on, Jeff?" And he explained what was going on, and there was a short pause, and then the nun said, "Shame on you. Get yourself out of the way. Care enough not to care. That little girl needs you to do that now." Now that may seem harsh, but sometimes in being compassionate, either to others or to ourselves, we can give ourselves excuses about what not to do, what we don't do, and why we shouldn't. And again, that's why I think it's really important in a program like this, because you need the support. It's so easy to talk yourself out of behavior change. You need that. And this is why I think this program is so awesome. So with a program like this, you could save 15% or more, 15% or more on medical expenses, years, and quality of life. Yeah, actually, you probably save more than that. You probably save more than that. This is not just about brain health. This is about every aspect of your life. Every aspect of your life. Let me give you an example. Was it 5 years ago now? I had a nasty car accident. I came across the median and smacked me head on. Fortunately, I wasn't in my car. I was in a rental car. concussed, broken sternum. General advice was, good job, you're in good health. You could have been a lot worse. 5 years later, emergency surgery for some kidney stones, got sepsis. Same thing. Good job, you're in good health. Because if you weren't, goodness knows. So this is really taking care of yourself. If you love yourself, and I hope you do, this is taking care of yourself. And there's no shame or selfishness in doing that. This is important. You have to do that. So that's really the essence of why this is such a critical program, and I'm delighted to be part of it. And I'm glad that you guys are all part of it. At this point, Aisha, is there anything that you want to pick up on?
This is beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
thank you. We also think that this approach of community empowerment and conversation is central to even to our research, the
Absolutely.
CBPR research in the communities.
Yes.
So thank you for highlighting that. The main component of what we are doing this month, and especially this week, is cognitive reserve and building cognitive capacity. And you have done some work on that, and would love to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. So that's coming next.
Yeah.
I wanted to put this in perspective.
In perspective, yeah.
So I want to just briefly go over brain states here, because I think people have a misconception about their brain and thinking and its relation to other brain type activity. So this is a pretty simplistic presentation that misses out quite a lot of complexity, but we don't need it. So there are basically 4 brain states, as it were, brain waves, cycles per second. Delta, 1 to 4 cycles per second is really sleep, and the deeper the sleep. Theta, 5 to 8 cycles per second is light sleep or meditation, just below the level of consciousness. Alpha, 9 to 12 cycles a second is relaxed wakefulness. You're not really focusing or concentrating too hard, or you're just hopefully sitting and enjoying something. Beta, 13 to 30 cycles per second as we go up, is more like processing, or what we would call top-down processing, where you are looking specifically at a particular topic, and you're trying to think, and you're trying to work on it, and you're trying to manipulate it in your mind. And what's interesting about beta wave activity is as that goes up, that really correlates a lot with stress and obsessiveness. So the more you put your foot to the pedal and the beta waves go up, the more stressful that can become. And why I think this is important, guys, is there's a difference between thinking and brain activity. Maybe it comes from education or classical education, which is, oh, well, you've got to be good at math, you've got to be good at writing, you've got to be good at memory and all that stuff. But there are other stages of consciousness that are very important, not just processing. And I'm sure that you guys have talked about mindfulness and how important that is. There we're in the low alpha, high theta. That's as important. Some might argue even more so than high beta processing. And so what is important here is you think about the brain, don't just think of it as working, as in processing and then doing nothing, okay? Because there's a lot more going on and a lot more potential in your brain than that. And that gets down to when we're talking about optimizing, we're talking about using your whole brain, right? All the different aspects of a brain. And sometimes you hear, oh, we don't use 100% of our brain. Well, not all the time. That would be a bit like having every system in your car turned on all the time. No, we don't need that. But what is helpful is to explore and develop these different levels of consciousness. And as I say, one of the things there is, I think, hopefully it's changing, is to do with a somewhat out-of-date education system that thinks of traditional processing and being good at math, having good verbal memory. You're good, anything else, oops, you don't do very well at. But you might be a creative genius. You might be a brilliant musician. You might be a brilliant mechanic, which uses a variety of these different skills. But that hasn't, at least up to now, I think, got the recognition in an education setting that it should do. And so when you're thinking about optimization, you're not just thinking about optimization at, I've got to be working and thinking hard. Developing the ability to be mindful would be huge, So again, we'll come back to this a little bit later on, but I think that's important to understand that these different states of consciousness are all very important. And it isn't just about, well, I'm working hard and now I stop, and etc. This is just a little brain map, an example of a brain map, and we have the technology now, amazing technology, to look at brain waves. This is called a QEEG brain map. We have the ability to look at activity at different parts of the brain, and you can see we've got the left and right side of a brain, and we've, in this case, we've monitored them, and you can see on the side here, blue would mean very low level, which wouldn't be good. This is a measure of the magnitude of those brain waves. Green is low. Black is okay. Red is high, and yellow is very high. And so this is just to show you that we can look at those things and we can see the brainwave activity. And in this particular one, you see that in the right temporal lobe, which is this area here, it's actually very low in theta wave activity and in alpha wave activity. And then when we get over here, we see that all of the central and parietal and occipital areas are actually low in beta. And these measures on when you do a brain map or something like this, neurofeedback, some of the little things I'll get into later, you can see quickly which areas are not just in magnitude, how well synchronized they are, what the symmetry is between the different sides of the brain. It's a really incredible opportunity, but I show that just for you to try to understand more about the brain, these different areas, the different levels of activity that go on, and how we can learn from that to develop them. Any thoughts or questions on that?
Not at this point. I think
Okay.
the audience,
We're good.
yeah.
Yes.
And as Howard says, if you have any particular questions about any sections, you can jump in and we'll share it with Howard.
Absolutely.
Okay. All righty. So energy, I think one simple way of looking at health and behavior is that concept of energy. And if your energy is out of whack, you're going to have a problem, right? You're going to have a problem. And energy is a very important concept, which is why, and people go from having a lot of energy and using it all up and then crashing. They go from anxiety, high beta, to depression, very low levels of energy. And for me, energy is a core concept. So anytime we're looking, we can increase energy, that's good. We also need to understand that the brain looks to conserve energy some of the time. So we can't go full out all the time. We don't want to do that. We want to have balance, and we also want to develop those sources of energy for us. So that brings us to physical activity. And for me, I certainly think that one of the issues with aging is the decline in physical activity. Physical activity is so crucial to cognition, to thinking. People don't understand that. They think it's about building muscles or doing stuff for heart or their physical health. physical activity is critical for optimal cognition because it provides energy. It also uses some excess energy too, which is why physical activity is probably one of the single biggest thing you can do for anxiety and stress. No question about that. So physical activity is critical for optimal cognition. There's a Harvard psychiatrist called John Ratey, interesting guy. He's written a book called Spark. And he says, in order for man to succeed in life, God provided two means, education and physical activity. And interestingly, there was a study done, and he was instrumental in it in the turn of the 2000s in Naperville, Illinois, where the school district started to introduce physical activity before different classes. And the physical activity they introduced wasn't necessarily gym. It was any. You could dance, you could skip rope, you could jump up and down, but it was being physically active. And the results they got are amazing. People who then they did do research, they divided into control groups. The kids that did the physical activity before different classes, their level of improvement was like 3 or 4 times greater than the kids who did no physical activity. And in fact, what happened, there is a universal test of science and math that countries typically enter. And usually the US comes in at about number 12 in math and science, often behind Asian countries. Naperville actually decided to enter as a country, having done this program. And they came in first in math and 6th in science. And so it is pretty clear that physical activity is critical for cognition and optimal cognition. And, you know, I can't say enough about physical activity, and I'm sure you couldn't either. Now, I also want to get into the issue of conscious and subconscious, because the subconscious works in us and can influence the way we think about things, what we do things, especially when we're trying to change behavior or adopt new behaviors. So consciousness is really our words and our thoughts. Our subconscious really doesn't come in words, comes in sights, emotions, and other senses. You see the little graphic there, mindful or mindful. And there's a big difference there. And this is relevant to behavior change. How is this relevant? One, I personally believe visualization is very, very important. If you can't see yourself doing something, the chance of you actually doing it is pretty remote. So I think visualization is a great skill. Actually, when I did my PhD thesis, I used visualization as as one of the groups in teaching people self-control. And the group that had visualization did a lot better and were able to improve that. So I think a very useful skill is visualization. The nice thing about it is you really don't have to do much except close your eyes and imagine yourself doing that skill, whatever that is. It could be making a burrito, it could be going for a walk, it could be whatever. Just see yourself. You're programming your brain to be able to do that. And I think that that is key, and it's very easy to do. And then what you tell yourself is key. And I've got a picture there of Yoda, there is no try. And I see that for a lot of people in behavior change, oh, well, okay, I'll give this a go. No, you're not going to give this a go. You're going to do it, okay? Because as soon as you say, well, I'm going to try, what does that mean? That introduces doubt and all sorts of other things into your narrative. And you really don't want to do that. So you want to make a commitment. I'm going to see myself doing it. I can see myself doing it. And I'm going to make that commitment to doing it. And I know that Dinesh, you're very, very passionate about just making a routine, making a schedule, a routine that just becomes part of your life. And once you've practiced that, it gets easier and easier. So that's important. That's the challenge in behavior change, clearly. Oh, I slipped this one in as part of it. I did a book with this woman called Barbara Morello, and she had, in 2009, she caught the SARS virus and was in horrible condition, admitted to the hospital, needed a heart transplant, was put in a coma. When she came out of the coma, she recalled all sorts of sort of dreams that she had in the coma. And obviously a family were there by her side, and she said, I had this dream of looking for power stations. And they said, oh, that's funny, because they were actually trying to start your heart then. And she had these various dreams and went down. And as I looked at her story, I said, you weren't just reflecting what was happening to you. I think that in your subconscious, you were working out some important issues in your life, which had to do with her identity as a woman, which had to do with an authoritarian father. And somewhere in this dream, she met some angelic figures who said to her, you will see through different eyes and your heart will be healed. She woke up 2 weeks later. She did see through different eyes because she'd had a stroke and it affected her vision. And the cardiologist came to see her and said, well, we'd better see what sort of state your heart's in. And she said, well, I know this is crazy, but somebody in my dream said my heart would be healed. And he said, yeah. And they went and they did it. And he came back in and he said, I don't believe it. You have a heart of a 20-year-old. And, what does it mean? I don't know, but the subconscious, I think the reason I'm using this story is the subconscious can be very, very powerful. And sometimes we think too much. My book, I Think, Therefore I'm Wrong. A lot of the time, our conscious processing of the way we are and who we are and what we can do isn't quite right. So it is important. In my graduate class, I had somebody who's now from South Korea, who's a motivation expert, called Gung Ho. Okay. If you don't fully understand the meaning of a new action, you probably won't do it for very long. Okay. So you have to understand. That's what I've been going on about the significance of what this program is. You have to understand what it means. And it's about your whole life. It's about your whole life. It isn't just about improving your memory, reducing the risk of Alzheimer's. It's about your whole life, because that's how those things happen. Now, attention. What are you going to pay attention to? We live in a world now where there are a gazillion people trying to get your attention. Right? Social media, TV, whatever. And there was a psychologist, Herbert Simon, who coined the term the attention economy. We live in a world where everything's trying to get our attention. And if you're not careful, you can sort of rubberneck your way through life, looking at this and looking at that. And what does that do? It depletes your energy, right? As you're spending time on all these things, your energy is going to go. Is it going to go on useful things? Davenport and Beck, two researchers, said attention is focused mental engagement. And when things come into our awareness, we have to decide whether we want to act on them or not. Stephen Covey, I think one of the most important things that I took from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was his distinction between the circle of influence, the things that you actually have some influence over, or the circle of concern, the things that you're actually concerned about. Yeah, you could watch TV coverage of a particular topic you're concerned about all day. Is that a good use of your attention and time? I'm not sure. But you have to, again, you have limited energy. Where are you going to put your attention? You're going to put it on things that you actually do something about, or just the things you're concerned about? And Sherlock Holmes, call a lot of times in Sherlock Holmes stories, Watson would say to Holmes, well, have you heard about what's going on here? And Holmes would have no idea. And Watson would say to him, why don't you? And Holmes would say, I don't want to clutter my brain attic with a lot of stuff that I don't want to, and not that I can't do anything about. Now, of course, he was a fictional character, but again, I think we need to pay attention to where are we putting our time, energy, attention, and effort. And that's really critical. One of the things I should have said earlier was one of the problems about behavior change a lot of the time is that the change is in the future. That in a few months' time, I'm going to I'll be 15 pounds lighter, or I'll be able to go to this event and I can get into that whatever, or what have you. And there's something in cognitive neuroscience called temporal discounting. What temporal discounting means is the further away something is, the less we really connect with it. And that's one of the problems. And so one solution to this, I don't have it on here, is, and I really like this, get yourself one of those apps, those aging apps, where you can put a photo of yourself in and you can look at yourself 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. When you do that, that's going to bring the future much greater focus, and I think it can overcome some of the temporal discounting that very often goes on. It's very hard to think, well, what's life going to be like in 10 years? Well, yeah, it's sort of an academic exercise, but you got to be able to connect to it. So that might be a useful thing to do. All right. Oh, multitasking. Okay. We know that multitasking is task switching. It increases stress, errors, and is associated with premature aging. The fact is that the brain really can only focus on one thing at a time, maybe for a few microseconds, but it can only focus on one thing at a time. And if you want to do two things at a time, you have to switch from one to the other. And I don't know whether you guys have talked about that. I know you probably have, but multitasking is, sorry?
Yes, we will. We'll discuss that today as well.
Yeah, multitasking is not a good idea. There are some situations, interestingly, where for whatever reason, the brain suddenly does get overwhelmed with stimuli. And sometimes we call that creativity. And sometimes we call it, a manic episode. There was the dean of the Institute of Psychiatry told me a great story. He was working there one evening and somebody was admitted who was a very famous mathematician. And he'd been admitted because he flipped out. And the next day, one of his colleagues, a brilliant mathematician, came to see him. And the doctor said to him, yeah, we got the notes that he was writing when he had this attack. And the mathematician friend looked at them and said, oh boy, that's amazing. No one's ever thought of that. That's incredible. That makes no sense whatsoever. There's where he lost it. And there's where he crossed a line from being really creative to totally blowing it. So again, multitasking is not recommended really for most people. Now, this is something that a brilliant man showed me one time. You might know him, Dean, because it was you, about neuroplasticity and why practice is important. And as Dean showed me, if the pathways in your brain that underpin a particular behavior aren't very practiced, they get weaker and weaker. And potentially, under stress of all sorts, they just snap. And bang, there goes that behavior, there goes that memory, there goes whatever that was underpinning in your brain. The pathways that are well practiced look like that strong rope. That's what we want to do for our best behaviors, is we want to practice and practice and practice and develop them so they are immune from erosion, from stress. And that is why practice is important. And Dean, I really appreciate you demonstrating that for me. I think it's important when we're talking about optimizing behavior.
Yeah, and now we had several conversation about this, and your thoughts were amazing as on this topic. We were talking about the fact that, in reality, the number of connections that we're seeing here in the rope is nominal, consider in comparison to what happens in the brain when you practice. And sorry to take a little time, but and we've spoken about this. It's practice and improve. Practice, reflect, and improve. There was a time where people talked about 10,000 repetitions for a habit to happen. It's actually changed. The idea has changed now. It's do it a few times, reflect on it, adapt it, which process improvement, and then that is exponential growth towards a behavior. That's a powerful tool that we have. This amazing brain of ours has the ability not to just inculcate and incorporate behaviors, but to significantly improve, especially if you reflect upon the behavior, which means, by the way, what you just said earlier, you have to know the behavior clearly, understand it clearly, and that way it's going to become much more feasible and probable, and in fact, it becomes a guaranteed behavior if you approach it that way. So thank you for bringing this up.
And then, of course, the other thing about that not only are you reinforcing that behavior, you're also reinforcing the issue of reinforcement, that you've learned how to do that. And now that can generalize. And you would know better than I that the process involved in this development, neuroplasticity, is not just specific to one pathway. It then generalizes to brain health altogether.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the idea that we have control not over just a behavior, but on improvement, once practiced with certain behaviors, which we, and in fact, this whole point of this month is that the whole point of this month is not that you're going to cure Alzheimer's. No, the point of this month is, and this is going to be really bombastic, you're going to actually change your life, because the idea of improving by reflecting and by systematically and measurably changing things and creating a system is so powerful. In fact, that's the whole foundation of everything we do. Ironically, as you say, I usually pick on blueberries. Today it's burrito that's being picked on. Yeah, it's not the blueberry. It's not the the burrito. It's not even the morning walk. It's the idea that we have control, profound, powerful control over behaviors across the board, which, like you said beautifully, they generalize.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. So this is, I think, a critical concept. So let's move on. And so this was a reinforcement of activities. When you're inside your comfort zone, you may be outside your enhancement zone, says Denise Park.
I love this.
Right? And that's true. That's true. In your comfort zone means you are not pushing yourself, which means all you're doing is the same stuff. So you're not regenerating, you're just reinforcing the same behaviors. So if you love doing Sudoku, which I know you do, Dean, if you love doing Sudoku and you play it, 3 hours a day, that's great. But, all you're doing is reinforcing the Sudoku. You're not doing much else, right? So you got to get outside your comfort zone. And just going back to Jeff, the military physical therapist, that's actually what he did and got unbelievable results. He pushed people outside their comfort zone, because typically when people have muscular pain, what are they told to do? Oh, don't move, just sit still, don't move, don't make it difficult for yourself, what have you. That's the worst advice actually you can give most people. You have to say, no, you got to get up and move. And when he did that, amazing. And those people were definitely outside their enhancement zone until they did that. So this is about challenge. There's no question about that.
Yeah, sorry, just to point that out, how beautifully you've organized this. That challenge, that pushing outside of the comfort zone, is literally the purpose of the brain.
Right.
Yeah, finding the mate was not the purpose of the brain, because we have
Well,
lower
it could be
organisms.
challenging for some people. So
I think Aisha is speaking about my efforts
No.
during our courtship, but no, beyond that, it's about pushing the brain, and that does multiple things. It finds purpose. It takes you out of the protective past protection and into the future, into the bright future. It pushes the neurons to make connections in the order of tens of thousands. But here's the thing: pushing yourself beyond the comfort, especially if done in a way that you and I and all of us talk about, which is in a systematic, clear, measurable way, where you don't, you could push yourself all you want and you keep failing, keep failing, keep failing. And after a while, it becomes almost like a self-fulfilling thing. And a lot of people actually create that environment where they force failure because it settles back to the comfort zone.
Yep.
No, small systematic improvements, systematic, is the foundation of brain growth. Thank you for sharing that video, that image.
Okay. And so we know that, so it is pushing your outside the comfort zone, and the skills that do that often come up aren't crosswords. And by the way, are you the neuroscientist who are begging people to play this game, this word game? I get so frustrated when I see that come up. Neuroscientists are begging people to play this game.
Not us.
1 + 2 = 3. Oh, brilliant. Your brain age just went down 30 points.
Yeah.
No, not really. So musical training, Gottfried Schlaug, these insights suggest potential new roles for music training in fostering plasticity in the brain as a tool in education and in the treating of a range of learning disabilities. Again, you're looking at things that most people would not think of, but would challenge them, get them to use all of the different parts of the brain in different ways. Huge. And of course, the other one is language learning.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get points for just being able to have a few accents. You actually have to learn the language. Is that right? I'm good at accents, but so exercising your brain by taking part in activities such as these, actually what he was referring to, interestingly enough, was not just learning languages, but also reading actually fictional stuff. So I thought that was interesting. But is learning language, ja, c'est une bonne idée, right? Das ist eine gute Idee. C'est eine хорошая idea. So it's a good idea if you want to learn a language. Of course, there's always some challenges when learning a language. Remember, I've had a lot of interest in languages, and one time I was going to Italy, and so I started learning a bit of language, and I went into a shop in Florence, I think it was, Firenze, and I said, un'acqua, un botella dell'acqua minerale, per favore. Bottle of mineral water. And of course they came back, yeah. No, I can't understand a word you're saying. Just give me the bottle of water. It's easier to talk it than it is to hear it. And that's actually one of the challenges of language learning, is that each language has its own rhythm. And so you have to learn that rhythm so you can separate out the phonemes and syllables and relate to what you know those words mean. So language learning can be a lot of fun. And today, with all the technological stuff that's available and ways of interacting with people in language, it's really a good skill. Right.
Howard, there's a question related to, we're getting a lot of questions too, so I wanted to, have some time to address them. Susan says, does this apply to singing as well as musical instruments? So
I think I think that it would apply to singing. Again, what's interesting is singing is about rhythm, right, and timing, and about doing that. And you don't see a lot written about rhythm and timing in relation to brain activity. But there's a guy I know, interesting guy, who developed a program around rhythm and keeping rhythm for helping children with disabilities, developmental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also then applied that to sports. The notion that, okay, if you're a wide receiver and you've practiced catching the ball a gazillion times, and you're dropping the ball or what have you, what may have happened there is your timing may have got, for whatever reason, the rhythm and the timing may have gone off. And of course, then the more you think about doing it, the more likely that happens. And that's one of the problems with, getting into those streaks. But timing, I think, is important. Rhythm is important. So singing would absolutely be in there, I think.
Yeah.
I think absolutely it would be in there. Again, because of that rhythmic component of it.
Yeah. Great.
Just to, as a conversational expansion of that, in our first book, we talked about this lady who had Alzheimer's, whose cognitive decline had gotten worse with an infection and was not speaking. And during the rounds, I actually asked her, some of the people have read this, that maybe she should, we should actually ask about her background. And we asked about the background, and we found out that she was a piano teacher for 60 years. And then I asked the lady, what's your favorite composer? And of course, everybody was a little aghast, like, she hasn't spoken in months. Why are you, she has Alzheimer's. I repeated the question, and in a very soft voice, she came back and said, "What a stupid question." So it was a stupid question, because the question was, who was a better composer, Beethoven or Bach?
Right.
So the point being that language is a central point of consciousness. In fact, there are many people that say that our consciousness is based on language, not just verbal language, but language. And musical language is the rhythmic component that comes even before regular language and leaves us even after regular language has left, which means it's a very powerful thread that connects us from the beginning, which is the rhythm of our heart and the mother's heart, and then the rhythm of voice, the rhythm of all the way to the end. So language and building your language capacity, one can do at any age, and actually becomes the foundation of cognitive building. And music, and this is coming from somebody who's terrible in music, myself, studying somebody who's amazing in music. I tell you, music is a powerful tool of cognitive building, but also creating that foundational thread of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about Aisha's musical ability, I want to know, have you shown these good people in your program any videos of Sophie singing?
Not yet. We were thinking of actually sharing something, hopefully later this week or maybe next. But we'd be happy to.
If you don't, I'm going to start a class action lawsuit to do that. Because she's amazing, and watching you guys sing together is fantastic. And
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So memory, and we're talking about long-term memory here. Memories, by and large, are increased or influenced by three things. One is the level of awareness you have at the moment something happens. Secondly is the level of emotion that is associated with it. And then, of course, third is practice, right? The issue with emotion is it works both ways. So traumatic events tend to hang around a lot because they have high levels of emotion associated with it. But so do fun events hang around a lot because they have high levels of emotion. And broadly, there's what's called explicit memory. Episodic is memory of very specific episodes. Semantic memory is sort of information, general knowledge, if you will. And then the implicit memory is procedural memory, how to do things, how to ride a bike, for example, and actually some emotional conditioning, how those emotional responses come. And I think that's important because it has some implications for how do you practice, how do you develop these things. And part of that is you make them fun and you practice them a lot, if that's at all possible. So another of my graduate friends, now a memory expert, Ivor Gotten, says he's a memory expert. Haha, meant to laugh at that, guys. Perhaps this is falling flat. When it comes to making lasting memories, emotions are as powerful as a high-protein burrito. Okay. That's not something important. Make what you're doing memorable. Make what you're doing memorable and fun, because you're much more likely to do it, but you're also more likely to remember it. It's more likely to be encoded. And talking of that, I missed something when talking about subconscious, how that works, in my own experience. I mentioned a couple of instances with me, and so there were times not that long ago where I was really trying to get back into running. And I would go out up a very nice path, and then turn around and come back down a road. That's how I would try and get my 3 miles in. And as I was coming back down the road, it was getting harder and harder for me. So it was, just push to the gas station, just push to the next, road, just keep pushing a little bit. And I did this. And then I realized something. Wait a minute, might be a good idea if I ran the other way. I went up the road, and then when I came back, I was running down the path that didn't have all these associations with struggle and effort and am I going to give up, right? And it worked. It wasn't the only reason I was able to get back to it, but I just found that. I just found that it was easier to do that running in a place that was not associated with a big struggle, and am I going to doubt? And so it works like that. Interestingly, there was a gal giving a spinning class one time, and she did this because she was located near the hospital, but she had the people imagining they were riding around the hospital, and around the hospital grounds and this and that. And at the end of it, people weren't terribly, it was okay. Well, yeah, unless it's a hospital you guys are working in, a hospital for most people doesn't have very many pleasant associations, And so if you're trying to get people to imagine riding around that, it's going to bring up subconsciously some of these things. So just be aware of that. The associations that are there, I think, are important. And again, we know that we can improve memory with greater awareness, greater emotion, and more practice. Any other thoughts on that?
No, we call it about ACEs, memory, and this is a practice that can be built and it all then becomes second nature. But it's a powerful practice. ACE, A for attend, meaning the brain works on raising signal, becoming more aware, bringing it to the surface. Using an analogy that people have used often, which is the iceberg. Bringing that 10%, 1% to the surface. That comes under your control once you get used to attending to something. And then connecting. If you want to memorize something, so you've attended to the thing that you want to memorize, because a lot of times we say, I'm going to remember, but you haven't really attended to it. And then connecting it to something in your past, either visually, structurally, verbally, some way it was connected, it linked to something. If you can do that, sometimes you can't, but that once you get good at it, it becomes a lot easier. And then emotionally connecting it, fearful or interesting or funny, something that you see that links it. I mean, if you do these three things and you become good at it, by the way, you really need to absolutely memorize something a couple of times a day.
Right.
And if you use this technique, you will never forget these things.
Right, absolutely. And Larry has a question, and he says, can storytelling strengthen long-term memory? And the answer is yes, especially if you put the information in a context of a story. We learn or we remember stories better than individual names and pieces of information that are not connected with each other.
Right, absolutely. That is something that people don't understand about communication in general. I just brought out a second edition of a book I wrote quite a long time ago on communication that's about that. People don't understand, they just talk, they don't really think about the audience, but they just don't think about how to maximize the impact of what they're saying through stories. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, social interaction, that is huge. And part of it is, unless you're in the business like we are, most people obviously don't think about what is involved brain-wise when they are interacting with somebody else. But if you think about it, there's a lot going on. You have to interpret what they're saying. You have to remember what they're saying. You have to focus. You have to, your own language interpretation, your short-term memory. I mean, there's so much brain activity that goes on in social interaction that it's important. It's really, really critical where your brain is working as a team, all those different elements of it, to give you a satisfactory social interaction. So social interaction is very, very powerful. And a lot of the time, when you can do these new things, whether it's, upping your exercise or learning a musical instrument, you can do them with other people. That's always an advantage, I think. Now, the flip side of that is isolation. And John Cacioppo, University of Chicago, says isolation can disrupt sleep, elevate blood pressure, increase cortisol, alter gene expression in immune cells, interrupt neural connectivity and cognition, increase depression, and lower overall subjective well-being. And I think that we know that. We know that. We see that. One of my graduate friends, Faye LaSleep, said, being bored can disrupt your sleep.
Yeah.
Being bored can disrupt your sleep. Now, that seems sort of counterintuitive. Oh, surely. No. Isolation is a huge issue. And of course, you see this a lot, I'm sure, in your practice. Very often there are organizations and people say, oh, no, you're 90, stay at home where you're used to it, don't. But if you're staying at home and you're totally isolated, that is a bad idea, right? It's a bad idea. I mean,
Absolutely.
And I've seen that. It's one of the worst things that happen. And interestingly for me, in my practice, and this may have happened to you too, I'm sure much more to you than it would to me, but it just so happened I saw two guys back to back who were in cognitive decline. The first guy, Fred, you looked at his brain maps, the sort of thing I was showing before, and, they weren't too bad, but he was in decline. And the second guy, Joe, you looked at his brain maps and you say, oh my gosh, how could this guy remember anything? Fred was very isolated, and Joe had a very social wife who was determined to get him out and do things and what have you. And even though Fred shows up on the imaging as being much better shape, his life was way worse off, and he was going down a lot quicker than Joe, who was out having fun, even if he didn't totally understand what was going on half the time. He was out having fun and socializing. And so isolation is a big issue, certainly in aging, I think, for sure.
Absolutely.
There's my mother-in-law. She lived to be 98. My wife and I would go, she was in assisted living. She moved in at the age of like 91 or something. Just the most sweetest person in the world. And one of us would go every afternoon, see how she was doing. And talking about music, one of the fun things that we found to do was to play her music from the 40s and 50s. And I'd be up kind of dancing around, and she would come alive. She would mouth the lyrics, the feet were tapping. I mean, it was amazing to see her come alive to music. And I think that speaks to what you talk about. So yeah, she was a sweetheart.
Later this week, I think, or maybe early next week, we will have an exercise on learning how to dance. So we have a friend of ours who is an amazing dance teacher who's going to teach the audience a couple of the dances. And that includes rhythm, music, movement, all the elements, and then hopefully social activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just want to mention something just as we finish up here about neurotechnology. I adopted neurofeedback and neurotechnology into my practice many years ago. And there's advantage. It can be an added value. And there's neurofeedback, which is biofeedback on the brain. And there are devices like this one that through sound and sight can temporarily get your brain waves in a particular brain state.
Yeah.
And as I say, they work temporarily. So for people who have difficulty relaxing or going to sleep, something like this can be effective.
Well, yeah. Sorry, we are just to honor people's time.
Yeah.
This
was wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
We had so many people chime in about their experiences, and they were completely on board with the concept of multitasking not being good for the brain. So that was one of the most common comments that we got, and that's absolutely true. That we basically do multiple things badly, and the power of giving ourselves a chance to excel in any activity, whether it's making a high protein burrito or making major decisions in our life, it all comes down to the same action of allowing ourselves to relax, to focus on one action at a time, and to be able to attend and focus on the nuances of that activity.
Again, you're amazing. You're a great friend. We will actually be going live with the group probably tomorrow night for a short check-in and answer some of the questions related to this talk. Thank you so much, Howard.
My pleasure.
And we will be connected from here on.
And thanks to everyone who joined us today. Again, there was a little bit of a glitch in the video, but everybody seemed to jump on the YouTube live session and everything went really smoothly. So great example of how stress management and quick thinking and not multitasking works. So you've just shown us how it actually works.
Yes.
Really appreciate you all. We'll make sure that the video is recorded and posted for all of you to watch again later. I'm getting phone calls because my patients are waiting for me. So if you hear a phone in the background, those are my patients. But in any case, thank you so much, Howard. We love you. And we are so grateful that you spent this time with us and kind of went over something that is very, very important. And over the next few days, we'll be talking about that as well. Please feel free to jump into Facebook and answer people's questions or their comments as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I will. Thank you guys for everything you do. Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay.